Hey everyone, I am Kate Volman, and I am so excited to be joined by Park Howell. He is a story strategist, he's a speaker, and he is the founder and CEO of Park & Company Marketing Communications. And he also has a really awesome podcast called The Business of Story, and that's what we're talking about today, is really helping business owners craft a better story. So Park, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
No, thank you, Kate. It's great to be here. I mean, it looks like you should have your own show. I mean,
Right?
you should be on NBC, CBS, CNN, whatever. I want to see you on there, like, working the CNN crowd, talking about Hillary versus Trump. I mean, you'd be great for that.
Oh, maybe I wouldn't get into the politics side. I'll have to do something else. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You never know, right? And then you could say, hey, she interviewed me.
Absolutely. Put it on my resume.
Well, Park, I'm so excited to chat with you. I feel like I know you because I'm a fan of your podcast. And so I'm listening to you on my way to the gym or just doing laundry or whatever. And I found your podcast through a mutual friend of ours, Jay Bear. And I'm so glad that I did, because you talk about the business of story so well, and you have amazing guests that come on. So before we dive into the storytelling, can you just give a quick 1 minute kind of who you are and your journey to why it is that you do what you do today?
Absolutely, and thank you again for being here. I'm out here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I've been in the advertising world for 30 years. I've run my own ad agency for 20 of those years. And the past 10, 12 years, I really started studying what Hollywood knew about story. And this was in the mid 2005, 2006-ish. We had our middle son go to film school over in Chapman University. And he has been in Hollywood ever since. He's a motion graphics artist. He's written a movie. He's trying to sell it. So he's doing the whole Hollywood, young artist type thing. And so he's all in. But while he was there, I just asked him, would you send me your textbooks, since we are paying for them, when you're done with them? Because I wanted the number one, vet the education. What does Chapman University do to prepare these young artists to be competitive and successful in the most competitive storytelling market literally in the universe, Hollywood, LA? And number two, what could we learn as professionals of persuasion in the advertising and marketing world that Hollywood knows about story crafting, and to see if we could apply it to our work? That's when I was introduced to a number of different screenwriters, how they approached it, and came down to Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell is America's foremost mythologist, and a lot of the work you see coming out of Hollywood is based off of a lot of Joseph Campbell's work, especially around this thing called the hero's journey, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware of this. And all they have to do is, if they are not quite sure of the hero's journey, just watch the very first Star Wars. It's throughout it. Watch anything Spielberg does. Watch The Matrix. Watch The Wizard of Oz. It's all the same story, just told with different characters in different settings. So we pulled that together. We thought, does this work with brands and brand strategy? And we created our own version of it called the story cycle. We created a hybrid, 10 steps of it that business people could get their heads around. And I was amazed, Kate. Our hypothesis paid off. We started using this. It just absolutely took off. We helped some Goodwill of Central Arizona out here, the thrift store retailer here in town, grow by more than 400% using this. We helped a community clinic called Clinica Adelante that had been around for 30 years, and they had to reinvent their story, and we took them through the story cycle process. 5 years later, we launched their new brand, authored through the process in 2010. So actually moving into 6 years later, they have achieved over 300% growth. So it has blown me away. Arizona State University saw what we were doing, especially in the world of sustainability and social and cause marketing using it. They asked if I would write a curriculum around it, which I have. And now we're teaching our third cohort of executives from around the world that come in for a 12-month program. It's both online and off, called the Executive Masters of Sustainability Leadership. And I'm one of 4 professors in that, and I teach the story cycle process. I call it sustainable storytelling for them. But what has blown me away is that you can use it for everything, from a solopreneur. A lot of small businesses use this to get their head around what is the real true differentiator they do in the marketplace, to very large brands. And I can tell you down the road about Coca-Cola, but I know your audience are primarily small businesses, so why don't we focus on what they need, and we can talk about how this process can really, really help them.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is so awesome. And how wonderful to be involved with such great companies that you've been able to see the process really pull them to create that story and then get those results.
Yeah.
Because I find, and we were talking about this before we started the call, a lot of small business owners are so excited about the tools and social media and just putting stuff out there, and they don't really necessarily take the time to craft that story of who they are, what they do for their customers, and why we would want to connect with them. And that's going to give them the result of growing their business, of really creating those things that they are reading about, like building a nice community online of people who love you and want to share your content. So there has to be that step. So I'm so excited to kind of walk through this 10-step cycle. We all love that whole idea of 3 steps, 5 steps, 10 steps, like whatever it is that we need to do. So smart of you to put the curriculum in that way. So let's talk about first,
okay,
what's the benefit to a small business? Like, why is this so important for a small business to craft their story? And then we can dive into those steps.
Well, a really great question, Kate. What we all see, and believe me, I've been running a small business for 20 years as well, is we're a little bit like infants, and we're a little bit like those that have deceased. That we come into this world as a commodity, and we go out of this world as a commodity. It's everything that happens in between and how we craft and live into that story that makes our brand truly memorable, truly special. So in this day and age of abundance, I mean, we have so much competition, and our customers are just bombarded with information and decisions and choices that it's really hard to find a differentiation that you can sell into unless you are really, really intentional about it. So the story cycle process, chapter 1, called The Backstory, is all about what is your number 1 position in the marketplace. What do you do better than anybody else? Now, this is commodity thinking, because the whole goal is to raise you and your customer out of viewing your brand as a commodity, because nobody wins in a commodity environment unless you're the low price leader. And that only really works for Walmart. And who wants to be a low price leader? There's no margin in it. You got to make it up in volume. So what we're all trying to do is level up our brands in our customers' minds and in their hearts to get them to that point of enlightenment, if you think about the Maslow hierarchy of needs, so that they can look upon what we deliver, and we can go out of our way to deliver something that actually empowers our customers and delivers greater results than they ever expected. Why do we want to do that, Kate? Simply, we can charge more money for it. We have greater margins in the process, and we have more loyalty, believe it or not. We absolutely have more loyalty. So when people get really clear on what their brand story is, then they really understand how they can connect with their customers on that level. A quote popped into my mind the other day, and I think it's really true, that nobody, and I mean no one, will buy into your brand story until you own it first. And by owning it means you've done the work to really do the soul searching, to understand what are the personal passions that drive your professional pursuit being expressed through your brand offering, be that a product or service, and how do you deliver on those promises. And of course, the more that you are vested in everything about your brand and owning that story, then the more you are going to get your employees to buy into it and all pull in the same direction. If you're looking for investors, they're going to feel that energy and passion. They're going to see the clarity in what you offer and how you offer it through a very well-defined brand story. You yourself are going to be happier to wake up every morning and bring more energy to it, because it's coming from your heart. It's not just coming from your wallet. It's not like, I'm just in this to make money. If you're just in this to make money, stop. Just go ahead and turn off the show right now. Go do something else. But if you're in it to follow your purpose, to empower and level up your customers through the brand stories you tell and you live, you will make more money than you ever dreamed of. And that's what this process is simply about.
And another piece that I think is so interesting and important is that whole idea that when you have that story in place and you know who you are and why you do what you do, it's easier to make decisions. It's easier to make decisions on where you're spending your time, how you want to communicate with people, how you're going to find your customers, what to say yes to, what to say no to. The day that I could actually say no to someone wanting to pay me to do something that just didn't fit what I was doing, I felt like my friends thought I was crazy. They're like, you just take what anyone offers you. And I'm like, no, you don't just take what anyone offers you. Right. And so you just, and it becomes, and then you don't doubt yourself when you don't take those opportunities. Because I think that's kind of a transition we all go through when we're starting a business, and we do kind of say yes to a lot of work just to get started and see what fits and doesn't. So I think that's very helpful in small business, especially because we can be pulled in so many different directions. When you have this story, oh my gosh, it's just, everything becomes so much easier and falls into place.
Yeah, you're clear about it, and then you can live into that story just like you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And going to your podcast, I mean, there's so many stories that we get to hear from the people that you interview, really interesting people from all different industries and areas. And so that's my little plug for people to listen to your podcast, to really get their juices going and ideas that they can walk away with. So process, I'm so excited about this 10-step process.
All right. Well, let's start a very simple approach. So to have your viewers write down these 10 questions, and as you're noodling through them, and they're really straightforward, think about how well you can answer them. And the challenge is going to be, you're going to come across some of these that you're like, oh, I never thought about that. Oh, I'm not sure I have that answer. That's where the deeper dive comes in. And of course, I've got a workbook that you can download from businessthestory.com that takes you through the process. It's got a video on each chapter that walks you through it. So I'm kind of there tutoring you as you go as your guide. And that really requires you to dig deep. But let's do a surface look at the brand real quick. All right. So the questions then I always ask them is, this is like chapter 1. What do you do better than anyone else? And you being your brand. What do you do better than anyone else? When you answer that, you start getting your number 1 position in the marketplace, how you are differentiated from your competition. Number 2, who cares? You know, so our hearts might be in this right place, and we might think we really have a wonderful offering, and we probably really do have a wonderful offering, but who cares? So this is identify your number 1 audience. And when you go through the process, we ask you to actually identify your top 3 audiences and prioritize them. But for this simple thing, what do you do better than anyone else, and who cares? All right, number 3, what do they want? What do your customers want as it relates to your brand and your brand offering? What is it that they are trying to achieve? Quite often, Kate, we put our brands as the hero of the story, in the center of the story, and we can't do that. We're the guide or the mentor. The most important person in the story, by the way, is the guide or mentor. But in this case, we want the story focused on our customers. So we got to ask, what do they want? Number 4, why do they want it? Emotionally, philosophically, even physically, why do they want what it is they want? Number 5, what's keeping them from having it? What obstacles and antagonists stand in their way? Is it cost? Is it time? Is it people around them says, oh, don't spend that kind of money, whatever. But what is keeping them have it? Maybe it's simply availability. Maybe nobody offers it like you do, and they just don't know about you yet. Number 6, this is where you come in. How are you, your brand, uniquely equipped to help them get it? So what is it that you do? How are you uniquely equipped through your authority, through your experience, through your capabilities to help them get it? Then you ask the question number 7, what are you going to do? All right, so you're equipped to do it, and they have this want that has not been fulfilled. So what do you do? This is often when the features and benefits come in, and how do you start interacting with that customer? When you dive into the book, we break this down to 3 levels: brand awareness, brand adoption, and a brand appreciation, the kinds of stories you tell in this area. But for the simplicity of this, just ask yourself, what are you going to do? Number 8, what does success look like? So often start with your story asking this very same question. What does success look like? What is it that you're trying to help your customers achieve? Number 9, and what does that success feel like? Once they have bought it and they're using it and it's helping them, what do they feel like? What is that emotional connection, the moral of the story? Where are you connecting the values and beliefs of your brand with what your customers share with you in the form of values and beliefs? So what does that feel like? Then finally, number 10, what do you do to get them to come back? Brand ritualization. How do you keep them, once they're in your fold, to keep expanding the story around you? So let's go through those real quick. 10 questions. And by the way, you can go to businessthestory.com, and I got a quick little blog post that have each of these. What do you do better than anyone else? Who cares? What do they want? Why do they want it? What's keeping them from having it? How are you equipped to help them get it? What are you going to do? What does success look like? What does success feel like? And how do you get them coming back for more? So those are the 10 basic questions we ask when we are doing the story cycle process. Now, when I do these, either if I'm speaking or I'm doing workshops, I was just up in the Bay Area working with a biotech company up there, working with their compliance people. And we did a complete one-day workshop around this, help them understand how do you use story to understand your own personal leadership story, and then how could they use it in bringing all this data information that surrounds compliance and create more drama out of it, so it connects with board of directors and investors and that kind of thing. Basically took them through those same 10 steps, but then we start digging deeper in each one to make sure that you're really owning each part of that story. So that's the quick overview.
Okay. Yes, because I was going to say, I'm listening to all the 10 questions, and I'm curious, for somebody that is going through the process, how long does this really take to dive into all these questions in the right way, to come up with the right answers?
Yeah. A lot of the solopreneurs and small businesses we work with, they say they'll sit down with this workbook and they'll say between 6 to 10 hours. They'll go through and then they'll ask their questions, go through, and by the time they're done, they will have a really good sense of what their story is. So it's a very short amount of time to invest in to really get that ownership of your story so that you can stand out in the business world. Sometimes if I'm walking them through it, what I'll do is give them an online form. They'll do a quick cursory review of it. Then I can sit down with them and in a half a day, really have this dialed in through one-on-one workshops or workshops with their team. So it just depends on how much, if you're doing it on your own, you can pretty much plan on it's a 6 to 10 hour process. Or, if you get us involved, it can be anywhere from 4 to 8, depending on how deep you want to go with it.
Okay. Can we break down 2 of these 10, and then I want to talk about some of the stories and successes and some examples that we can go through with people that you've worked with, or even stories that you see online. So sure. I think the 2 that, they're all amazing questions, but I think what's interesting, because I still get it when I ask people, who is your customer? Like, who are you doing this for? And I still get people that say, well, everyone.
That's the trouble.
I sell a vitamin, so everybody needs it. If you have skin, I'm selling to you. I sell lotion. And so how do we as business owners dive in so that we're not looking at it from our eyes, but an outside perspective, and realizing we need to get a little bit more specific because we're not for everyone.
Yeah, great point. This little brand that I'm drinking right here seems to be ubiquitous on every street corner and seems to be for everyone, but it's not everyone. They know their audiences very, very well, and they cater to those audiences. But, tea drinkers, you get in there. But if you're not a caffeine person at all, you typically don't show up at a Starbucks. So you're absolutely right. It seems counterintuitive in this world where we're all scratching and clawing for our share of the marketplace. You think you need to be for everybody. It's just the exact opposite, man. You have to have a focus on who that customer is and take that as deep as possible.
So so if someone, let's just say someone's laughing because they're saying, I kind of still feel like I am that person. Is there a way like that you break it down so specifically as far as just to try to get them to hone down a little bit more so they have that idea in mind of it's an athlete, but at what level and how often, like it's kind of, I guess it's kind of that whole buyer persona exercise.
Yeah.
Like getting into the minds of your customer.
Well, let's start with, and I know you had a couple chapters that you want to look at specifically. May I indulge me for a second, and let's take the very first one because it's a great way to answer your question there. So to understand your position in the marketplace, I got this exercise 20 years ago. And so it's not mine. I got it from a book, but I can't remember the book and I can't remember the author's name. I know eventually they're going to show up and say, hey, dude, you're using our stuff, but it's that good. So
oh my gosh.
Here's what you want to do to understand your number one place in the marketplace. Answer these 4 questions. At the 50,000 foot level, what industry are you in? Now, as you start coming down, what category in that industry do you service? Now, coming a little bit closer to the weeds, what specialty do you provide within that category, within that industry? And then finally, what is your number one specialty? What do you do better than anyone else? So let me give you an example of, for me, from my standpoint, but then let me also give you an example of a solopreneur. I worked with marketing consultant over in Oxford, and she went through the workbook, and then we did a 1-hour session online, and we got her there. So for me, my industry is the communications industry. And maybe yours is as well, Kate, and you follow along with what you do. And I say communications because that's what we do. We help companies communicate, but at that high level, you know, we could also be AT&T. They're in the communications industry. We could be CNN. They're in the communications industry. So this is where we start, you know, separating ourselves out. So what category are we in through the business of story? We're in advertising and marketing. So now I've all of a sudden just carved out all of those other industry professionals, and people are starting to think, okay, so you're an ad guy, ad biz, ad agency, whatever. Let's get even more specific. So what's my specialty within that advertising and marketing business? Because it could be a digital firm, it could be publishing, it could be a traditional ad agency, it could be public relations, it could be all these other specialties. But my specialty is in brand, story, strategy development, really focusing and helping brands get their story straight. And then they may bring in 4 or 5 of their agencies, one being a PR firm, one being a digital firm, one being a web firm, one being an event firm, to enact those stories. So I'm not that overall agency. I'm that consultant that helps you get your brand strategy story straight. Now, I'm also, there's a number of us out there that are brand strategists. So I want to differentiate myself even more, and I get down to my number one specialty. My number one specialty, and that I can prove it over the 30 years too, is you got to be able to have some authority behind this and prove it, is that I help organizations achieve epic growth for their enterprise and their people through the story cycle process. Now, the story cycle process is uniquely my own. There are other people that have, you know, their own proprietary, you know, systems and whatever, but this is my platform, the one that has proved its worth for me and my clients. So that's what I own in the overall communications realm. I'm the story cycle guy. If you want to get your brand story straight, Park's the guy to call if you want to go through this process, that, you know, this 10-step process. So that's a really great way for anybody. In that very first sentence, that first chapter, answer those 4 questions. What industry, what category, what specialty, and what is your number one specialty? So real quick, let me tell you about Corinna Tarrant. She is a solopreneur, mom of two because she's in Oxford, England. Wonderful young professional. And she had been in the marketing world for 5 years or so, had a nice career going, got married, had 2 kids, decided to stay home, help raise the kids. And now that the kids are going off to school, she's got a lot more time. And so she wants to get back in, or has gotten back into the marketing world. So she said, Park, I've got some good business, but I'm just kind of floundering because I'm just another person out there doing this. She literally, like you, Kate, like me, are commodities offering marketing communication services unless we own our brand story. So I took her through the same 10-step, she went through the whole 10-step process, but she also did the backstory of industry, category, specialty, number one specialty. What we arrived at for her, and I love it, and she said it is already bringing great results for business, is when we were going through this whole thing, I asked her 3 things. I said, number one, Katrina, what really drives you personally? And she goes, well, I was always an artist. I grew up as an artist. I paint. I just love art. I don't make a living at it, but it's just something that I really, really love. And I asked her, how do you think that's helped you as a marketer? Well, connecting of the dots and seeing things in a different way and being able to visualize that. And I could totally get that because I was a musician. I studied composition and theory, got a degree in it. And I've been able to use that education to help with my work and my clients in a very artistic way to come in and work in communication. So I totally got that. I said, right on. And I said, number 2, what did you study at university? Because she graduated with a degree in psychology. I said, that's interesting. Why psychology? And she said, because I was just fascinated about the brain and how it connects these dots and how it works. And I said, okay, so you graduated with your degree and then you went into marketing. Yeah, I was a writer, worked for technology companies. I was very adept at being able to take really complex things, connecting the dots, simplifying them, and then creating interesting communications and marketing plans around them to help sell for my technology companies and my biotech companies, whatever. So to me, these were 3 really critical pillars that came out of the overall 10 steps, but we used it for step number 1, the backstory. And what we arrived at for her is you hire Karina to help you achieve, again, epic growth, because she really understands how the mind is designed to buy. The mind, her psychology degree, designed her designer degree, and the connecting of the dots to buy her marketing degree. And she's like, oh my God, that's so great. And I can tell you, it wasn't me, it was her. All I did is guided her through it and said, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And she then wrote me a very enthusiastic email the next week. And she said, I was at a networking event and this guy came up and was like, hello, I'm so-and-so, and what do you do? And she was able to roll out her story, and I say little story, not a condescending way, but simplified. She goes, I work with very technologically driven companies, complex situations, and help them achieve epic growth because I appreciate how the mind is designed to buy. And she's like, you wouldn't believe this guy. He just lit up. He's like, oh my God, I've never met anyone like you. And yet the room was filled with people like her. You know what I mean? But she had her story straight. She owned her story. And I got an email. I asked her if I could put a little case study in my blog, which I did last week. I said, is it okay if I call you out? And she said, absolutely. It's been great. I just got back from holiday and I've got 3 new prospects now. And so an example of how she leveled up from this commodity thinking into somebody that is uniquely herself, a unique professional in a commoditized industry. And if you're that customer that has a complex sale, who are you going to go to? You're not going to come to me. You might go to Kate, but you're definitely, if you're over in England, you're going to go to Karina. Yeah. So that's an example.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really, really great. I love that idea because I feel like it's very helpful to have that third party person, because we don't always know the value of our story, of the value of behind the scenes of what we've seen, of what we've experienced as we build our business and the work that we've done. And so I love that idea of being able to help this. You're able to craft that little 30-second pitch that we all have, that one, couple seconds to really grab someone's attention, to want to even have a conversation around how you might be a good fit to work together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Park, I feel like Oh my gosh, I need to go through your workshop. I just need to go. I need to experience the whole thing. Before we go, I would love to know, in your opinion, what are some brands that do a beautiful job storytelling that you just really love, either listening to their podcast or following them on social media or just being part of their communities because they share amazing stories?
Yeah, you're going to hear probably me say the same ones that a lot of other people say. So I'll try to think of some other unique ones. Patagonia comes to mind. They have always done an amazing story from day one when they started over 40 years ago. And we had Vincent Stanley, the director of philosophy for Patagonia, on the podcast very early, about a year ago. And it's just amazing what they've done and how they stayed true to their story. And what I like about them is their story, or their call to action is they're trying to turn customers into activists in very positive ways. So they go out of their way, say, don't buy our gear if you can repair it. Don't buy our gear if you don't need it. If you do buy our gear and you have some old gear, who can you gift it to? So they kind of even go out of their way of, we're not about conspicuous consumption. We want you to buy and use only the stuff that you need. They've got a documentary called Wornwear. Wear Worn. Wornwear. Either way. It came out a couple of years ago.
I'll Google it.
30 minutes long, and it's fabulous. They pull out 5 unique stories of how people use and reuse and repurpose the Patagonia gear. Who does that? What retailer says, don't buy our stuff unless you actually need it? Well, they actually had a print ad that says, don't buy this jacket. If you've got one that's already working for you, don't buy it just to hang it up in your closet. So then they take that much further into how they activate their customers through their own social media work and the documentaries that they fund and produce. They've got one called Damnation that is just brilliant, done, I think, 2 years ago. Well done. And it's just talked about the hundreds of dams that were built in America to try to harness these rivers over the course of 100 years, and now how people are going in and starting to take them out, especially the real superfluous ones, and just the history behind how that happened, the movement to start removing dams, and how the earth is repairing itself in the process, which then is creating greater wonderlands and playgrounds for all of us to use, a la their customers. So I think they're doing a really, really terrific job with it. Someone else I think is doing a good job is Uber. Now, Uber, you don't see a lot of storytelling online. You see some print ads here and there, but it works wonderfully through their drivers. And just, again, being up in the Bay Area, they say their story claim is Uber is the smart way to be transported. It's not quite right. I think I've got it written down here. What is it real quick? Uber says it's the smart way, and I can vouch for this because I did it too. I want to get this right. The smartest way, the smartest way to get around. So I fly in, land at San Francisco, international, boom, hit them. The guy's there in 10 minutes. The first place I was supposed to be dropped off turns out not to be the right place, and I get redirected 40 minutes down the way. And I said, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm actually supposed to be up there. Can you take me? He goes, well, I was just about ready to get off, but yeah, I'll take you. So he took me all the way down there during rush hour, dropped me off, headed back, I think, without a fare. So just the story about that. Here's an Uber driver going out of his way. So the next day, driving back, the firm, my client, hired up a taxi to bring me back. Well, I can tell you, I paid $150 for that taxi ride with a guy grumbling at me for that entire trip. And the Uber I took from my house here to Phoenix, Sky Harbor International Airport, from San Francisco to San Rafael, and back again, only cost me $90 with 3 unbelievably pleasant drivers, had water for me, chatted. The one guy that said, I can tell this guy doesn't want to chat, so I'm not going to chat him up unless he starts it. To me, I think Uber does a really beautiful job with their stories by the way they help live that story through the drivers. So I think that's another, really good example of it. And as far as small businesses, you can go to businessofstory.com. I have a ton of case studies there of little businesses and how they use this and how they're really standing out.
Awesome. Well, Park, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. You're just such a great resource for business owners and brands because you just share great stories on your site as well as the workbook that you have. And I believe you're writing a book, right?
Yeah, yep. I'm still going through the workbook because I keep adding to it. Like, oh, because the people will take it. And so I got to get that out of the way so I can finish up my other book. It's basically 90% there, and I just got to get off my butt. I think it's fear of rejection. I get the thing done, I put it out there, nobody buys it, and I think that's that last little hurdle I'm trying to get over.
Well, we'll buy the book because you are an awesome resource. And where is the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, businessofstory.com. And if they have any questions, they can send me a note at park@businessofstory.com. And Kate, if you're listening this weekend or on your way out, I think you're going to Content World, Marketing Content World?
Content Marketing World.
Content Marketing World, thank you. I've got a really amazing guest, Don Yeager. I met him at the National Speakers Association. 9-time New York Times best-selling writer. He's written over 25 books, former associate editor of Sports Illustrated. This guy can tell a story. And in the show and the podcast I'll be airing this weekend, it's all about how do you find stories within your business, around you, the people around you. How do you find stories? How do you recognize that there's a story there? And then how do you interview to dig up all the wonderful nourishment of that story so that you can be telling brand stories that you truly own to get others to buy into?
I love it. Awesome. Okay, so everyone go check out thebusinessofstory.com, listen to his podcast, get the workbook. You're awesome. Thank you so much again. I so appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate. It's an honor to be with you today. Thanks.